Coming up, actress, writer, director, and all-around amazing gal, Illeana Douglas joins Illeana in just a moment.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies.
And now, it's the I Blame Dennis Hopper podcast, starring Illeana Douglas. Eavesdrop with Illeana as she interviews Hollywood's most prominent players about filmmaking, acting, and what really happens on the set of your favorite flicks and TV shows.
Yes, it's the show you've been waiting for. Illeana Douglas.
It's an Illeana-rama.
It's all Illeana-rama. Welcome to I Blame Dennis Hopper podcast. My lovely co-host, Tamara Berg.
Hi, everybody.
Today's going to be an interesting potpourri.
A melange.
Of Illeana. Mm-hmm. This is like my childhood dream.
Right.
Will everyone look at me? And
listen to me.
Listen to me for once.
You get to play Dick Cavett and yourself.
Oh,
there you go.
My God. Although I'm more comfortable. I love interviewing people. So it's been, because you have a reason for stalking them and being such a fan of theirs. And
I've done all this research.
Knowing all about them. When you tell Dick Cavett, when you're interviewing him, as I recently did, that, when I was a kid, we didn't have an antenna, so I used to have to go to my mom's room. She had a little portable television. You have to turn it on its side, and you kind of sort of get Dick Cavett. And when you're interviewing them, that's winsome. But like when you go up to them as a fan, I think they maybe cringe. So.
All right, so let's explain why this is happening. Okay.
Right. So we had some scheduling changes.
Yes.
And we decided that we would use this time to do the show that we've been actually wanting to do for quite a bit. And that was, talk about some of the stories in your book, fill them out a little bit.
Absolutely.
And it's just a great opportunity for us to, you don't always get to ask Illeana questions either.
I'm in the booth.
No.
I'm outside,
so it's an opportunity to really kind of dive in deep to some of the stories that are in the book, and some things that, when we're just chatting, I don't always write notes when we're just talking, believe it or not. But sometimes I feel like I should, because I think, oh, wow, that was really great. We should probably talk about that on the podcast, because there's a lot of pre-conversation that we have, or when, you and I just chat on the phone.
Absolutely.
So this is our opportunity to do it.
Yeah. We can answer fan questions.
I have a couple.
Mm-hmm. Here, movies that are out, that are out now. We can talk about that.
Yeah.
Holiday music.
And if any of our fans do have questions that they want to ask us about in the future, tweet us. You can go to our website, which is illeanaspodcast.com. It has all of our contact information. You can also write comments there. It connects you to our Facebook page, all of our social media. So there are lots of ways that they can get in contact with us and ask us the questions that they've been wondering that we haven't gotten to yet. So one of the things that you talk about in your book, which I was rereading for the third time the other day. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Available on Amazon.
And out in paperback now, as well as hardbound.
Out on paperback.
So you say, one of your friends said to you, Illeana, your life is like a movie. And I'm just reading from the book.
One of my friends. All of my friends.
Oh, was that right?
Illeana, your life is like a movie. And eventually I just started living it as if it were a movie.
So you say, the greatest compliment I can give myself or anyone reading this is to say, you are the star of your own movie. You are surrounded by an amazing set of characters with a story that only you can tell. Now, you may not think it's the healthiest thing in the world to live your life as if it were a movie, but somehow it's worked for me.
I think so. And it was very funny. Before the show, we were chatting because I said yesterday I saw Lady Gaga on television with a psychiatrist, and she said she was suffering from PTSD, and one of the symptoms, I'm sorry to laugh, I know, but she was very serious. She has a mental illness, and one of the issues was that she disassociates and sometimes feels that her life is a movie. Like,
and you were going, yeah.
I was like, yeah, welcome to the party. I'm on reel 12. But she was talking about disassociating as a negative thing. I think it's a positive. I state in the book that as a child, me believing that I was going to one day become friends with Richard Dreyfuss is just, you could say you're just...
It's a form of delusion.
Yeah,
course.
magical thinking.
But as a kid, it's just imagination.
He was my friend. I pretended to be him. I didn't have any confidence, and I was him and assumed his persona. And suddenly people liked me. Like they thought I was funny and plucky and cocky.
Let me ask you this. From what movie did you take? What persona
which
did
character?
you take? Which character?
Well, very specifically, I saw him in American Graffiti, and then Jaws, and that
Cooper.
and then The Goodbye Girl.
Oh, yeah, good.
Oh,
and
my gosh.
most especially The Goodbye Girl. I became like, I'm Richard Dreyfuss.
Never
I'm gonna
put your
be-
panties drying on the
I
rod.
don't like the panties drying on the
No,
rod.
he had this
He's very
like,
plucky.
he had this uber confidence. He was like,
Yes.
I'm an actor, I wrote lines down from the film, and, I was putrid, capital P, capital U, capital Trid. Great Neil Simon script, of course. But, I assumed those qualities because I didn't want to be who I was. So, and then the other persona I adopted was Liza Minnelli, and I've spoken about this again. I literally got my first job pretending to be Liza Minnelli.
From Cabaret?
From Cabaret.
Cabaret, okay.
Specifically from Cabaret. And again, she always played a kind of plucky, no nonsense, eccentric, but sexy girl. And I thought, I can do that. So, and I grew up in the land of Cheryl Teague, Christy Brinkley. So, being Liza was a little outspoken, but it worked in the theater, So all of my early personifications, walking into a dinner theater and trying to get a job, I was not Illeana. I was Richard Dreyfuss and Liza Minnelli. So is that disassociating?
Well, I saw I saw an interview from Lady Gaga, and one of the things she was talking about was that, she has these legions of fans worldwide who have expectations of her every minute of her life. And she was talking about how once she crosses the literal threshold of her home, she sort of becomes, and I've heard many celebrities talk about this, how they belong to the fans once they are out in public. Right. And so so they feel like they have to live up to certain expectations and be a certain way for them.
Right.
Which creates like this scenario where you always have to be on, you always have to be, available.
Right.
And I think that might be some of what she was talking about, because I didn't see the interview that you are talking about, but I saw other interviews with her and mentioning that. So, I could see that being an incredible drain, when you're feeling like you're continually on stage.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But in this sense, it seems like for you, to some degree, your personality was tabula rasa, and so then you adopted other personalities, personas, to ingratiate yourself, or whatever. I'm sure you got feedback that was positive, and then you went, "Oh, hey, this works." Is that how
Absolutely.
it works? So that
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I wrote a story in the book that I was in acting school, so cut from being a teen to being in acting school, and I was cast in the play Uncommon Women and Others, Wendy Wasserstein, and I could not get a handle on the part, and I thought, the director did not like what I was doing, and literally in an act of desperation, I said to my friend, "Fuck it, I'm just going to be Richard Dreyfuss." And he laughed he laughed. And the next day I was like, I did the entire part. Like, I was Richard Dreyfuss. But of course I'm not. I'm Illeana. But I walked down the set and I did this and I did everything through the filter of being Richard Dreyfuss. And the director was like, okay, I don't know what you're doing, but it's amazing. I was like, I'm doing Richard Dreyfuss in Jaws. And my friend I went to school with his friend. People were always astonished at. Well, did I tell you about the? When I went into stand up, my roommate used to always say to me, "You're not funny.
You're not funny.
You're not funny. That is not funny." And then I'd go up and make people laugh. So sometimes, again, is that disassociating from reality? You just have to have, the belief that these things are going to go over well. And I sometimes the people, I don't know what their belief system is, but a little bit of, mental illness is, I think is a good thing. A little bit of mania. You just have to,
manage it
a bit,
Well, and I think that your method of adopting a persona to it's essentially it's using it as a tool to help you get to where you want to be.
Yes.
And I think that's incredibly healthy, and maybe that's the difference, because in perhaps in Lady Gaga's situation, she's she's actually stripping away when she's going out in the world, and that's too much vulnerability for her. Whereas you are bringing on, in adopting a character.
For me personally, the idea of labeling yourself and saying, I know it's important. So it as I say this, I'm stumbling because it's like, well, they have these fans and the obligation, and they need to say, well, I'm mentally ill, because of those of you out there are mentally ill. But then what about the people who go, I guess I'm mentally ill?
Yeah. Well,
like they want to be mentally ill because the person that they admire is mentally ill. Right. Now, my feeling is when you're playing a part as an actor, if you tell everyone, well, my father was alcoholic and he did this and I ran away from home, and it's like, oh, well, then I guess the part's easy for you. See, I would rather get all the accolades for doing something. I wrote in the book, I blame Dennis Hopper when Nick Nolte saw a rough cut of Cape Fear. He took me aside and he said, "Are you sure you never did drugs?" Yeah. I thought that was like the greatest compliment, because whatever I had taken from my life worked in that film. And I think it's no secret that artists have obviously a lot of kind of mental illness, phobias, anxieties,
or things that can be associated, because you have to have an amazing imagination, and what's the difference between that delusion and then you have complete blind faith and commitment in whatever you're doing in order to portray it. And other people think, that's more delusion because she actually believes that.
And also,
to some degree you have to, on some level.
Well, and also the willingness to be incredibly vulnerable, because it is you bringing things out into the world. So some of your own personal psyche and your own personal drama, and can be attacked and can be.
It is, and again, the perspective is, it is crazy. You're nuts. But if you're doing it as an acting exercise or in a role, then it looks, no, those are the tools that you have to have.
Right.
Well, yes, you're talking about, I remember, being in school, and there was a wonderful Arthur Miller play called After the Fall, which he based on Marilyn Monroe, and it's an incredible part for an actor. It's very out of reach. I mean, it's the kind of play that you could spend years sort of trying to figure out, because you're obviously playing Marilyn Monroe, but she's an alcoholic, she's suicidal, it's the collapse of their marriage. So, but when you're working on a scene like that months at a time, I mean, it of course it's bound to, I find that stuff always affects me.
That was actually one of the questions that I have a list of questions that I have on hand, and some of them apply to various and sundry guests.
Yes.
And that was one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, do you remember any particular roles that you've done where the character that you play bled into your real life, or you had a realization about your life because of playing the character? Do you remember any of those?
The most obvious one, and that's why I devoted a chapter to it in the book, is the film Alive, which was about real life people. And when I had met Frank Marshall at the premiere of Cape Fear, he said, you cry really well. Maybe you want to cry in my movie? And, you know, and then I was auditioning for Alive, and at the audition, we went out to L.A., and he mainly just kept talking about how dangerous this experience was going to be, and we're going to fly to the set on a helicopter, and we're going to live on a mountain, and it seemed, you know, at the time I was, you know, living in New York, very kind of germ phobic. I couldn't go to sleep unless everything was neat as a pin. And I thought, wow, this is an opportunity to really, because that's one of the most incredible things about being an actor, is the opportunity to travel and learn
and for those who
something
don't
about
know,
yourself.
Live is about the airplane that crashed on the mountain.
Andes.
In the Andes,
and
yes.
it's a soccer team.
Yes.
And what they have to do to survive that. And
Yes.
Some lived and some did not.
that's right.
And,
so, you were flown by helicopter to the set every day.
Yes, you know, and contracted to lose weight in the film, and the film took over 4 months to shoot because of the weather conditions. But you know, I learned so much, and in the story, the people in the plane crash have to confront whether or not they would be willing to eat the bodies of the dead. And so therefore, in my own life, and coming from, you know, as I said, New York, like ordering Chinese food, to suddenly being on a mountain in which the one porta potty at 12,000 feet gets changed out once a week, and we're basically living on 1,200 calories a day. You know, no sleep, getting
Well,
up
that
at
explains only once a week change for the porta potty.
Right, they didn't need to.
well, we didn't change our clothes, you know, wearing the same thing,
Yeah.
not having any makeup, not washing your hair, just the idea of the conditions, 30 below, going in the snowstorm and helping out the crew. And, you know, we really became a family. We were really there for each other. But I learned for the first time what I was made of. And I didn't think, I was like, oh, I'd be the first one, if I were in a plane crash, to be like, curl up and die, you know, like that. I really thought that. I'd be like, I'm a quitter. There's no way. I'd be like, you know. And I learned, I was almost kind of upset by my own stamina, my own strength. We did 2 3-day fasts.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah, we went through, you know, a lot. I lost a tremendous 4 months, lost a tremendous amount of weight. My hair started to fall out.
Sure.
You know.
Would you recommend this as a diet regimen? Is this something that you?
No, it was the most unhip. Plus, we had to act on camera. But
now, did it help accessing what you needed to?
It absolutely it absolutely did. And also, you know, I was raised as a Catholic, and I'd really gotten very far away from any kind of church or feeling like that. And also, again, being around the real life survivors. And talking to them at length about spirituality, life and death. I had a complete sense of my renewed purpose in life. The first thing I did when I got off the film was I made my first short film, which was called The Perfect Woman, and ended up winning a bunch of awards. And I took all the money I made this film and started kind of my, you know, haphazard directing career, but started with that short film. So that film for me was absolutely
that was a product of that of
it was a product of doing the film, more than the film itself. So the film is one thing, and it was an incredible privilege to be in the film, but the experience behind the film, I mean, imagine, you know, working, and we think of them now as icons, but working for Frank Marshall and Kathleen Kennedy Marshall, and think now what they have become and what they represent. At the time, they were still incredibly powerful directors working with producers working with Spielberg, but what that represented, you know, and what that experience was like in a big studio film, and it was more than any other film. That was the most that changed my life completely.
What year was it?
I believe that was around 93.
Okay.
And so, I would imagine there were times subsequent to that where you went, I can do that.
Oh,
Thank you. That was my next thought.
Right?
That was always every film I've ever done since, people there would be a night shoot or something.
Yeah.
That,
This is nothing.
people would always say, you don't complain a lot. No, this isn't cold.
Alive.
Yeah.
We have a trailer.
Yeah.
How'd you like to be on a mountain? And they take they take your parka off, and you're shooting, and you're wearing a dress.
Yeah.
You don't complain much. You just physically and mentally, and again, that was a representation of wanting to please our director, Frank Marshall. We just loved him so much, and we wanted to represent this story, which was true for the people that were there. People died. This was a real life story, and we were 180% into that film, to the point of, again, as I say, risking, our own lives. I had to do something repeatedly where I had to be buried in snow. And they had to pack me in snow and then pull me out and, have a little breathing tube.
Yeah, no
and
kidding.
The breathing tube was pulled out.
How many takes are we going to do on this one?
I know. Well, imagine you do it and you're, you could really, it was like, we always use that expression. It was like a movie. I was in a movie, but, you're under the snow and you could hear your, you're like, yeah, they're not I'm gonna die here, and you have to be dead. You can't scream.
Yeah.
You have to be a dead body as they pull you out, and they were scratching my face, and because they're acting, they have to try to pull my body out, but we did it, and it didn't work. Do it again. Get back in there.
How many times do you have to do that? Do you remember?
Yeah, we had to do it 3 times. And they swore to me, they said, we're only gonna do this once. So everybody be ready. Only once, And we went, I came over, and everybody ran over to the monitor, and Frank Marshall was looking at it, and he's just kind of like, ah. When they pulled me out, these little things, the hair, because my hair was soaking wet, the hair had sort of covered my face. Damn it. He goes, think you got one more in you? And you're like, yeah. Yes.
I'm not dead yet.
But by the 3rd time, I couldn't feel. I mean, I had an I had an ice cream headache in my entire head.
Yeah.
My teeth, it just was. And again, we're on a mountain.
Yeah.
There was no.
It's not like you're gonna go get in the hot tub.
No hot tub. No, we had the set was called. We had a built-in set for the death scenes that was actually called the mausoleum, and they took styrofoam, and they had styrofoam as the base, and then built. This was in the movie. There's an avalanche, and so the snow. What would happen in avalanche? Snow literally comes rushing in
into the plane,
and it is up to the plane. So people were buried, and so in order to shoot the scenes of people trying to uncover the people, they created a set called the mausoleum, and it was made out of styrofoam and filled with actual snow. And you were just literally like put in it and buried.
Snow was
buried in the snow, and then people dug for you. And hopefully got
Has
you.
anybody seen Illeana? Did we find her?
Wait.
It's talk about trust.
Yeah.
Wow. But yeah, you do that a few times. You're like, this is not gold, people. This is not,
And so that's been a while, but it still has stuck with you.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. One of the great decisions of my life doing that film, and it wasn't like it was a major starring role. It was, an ensemble. Yeah, we were all on the plane, and Ethan Hawke is the star, and Vincent Spano, and Josh Hamilton, and we were really there just servicing the material. But we got so into it, and again, having the real life survivors there, Roberto Canessa, and Nando Parado, just life changing.
I remember so vividly reading the book because it was I was in high school or middle school, and a very impressionable age, and a lot of times in my growing up, everybody would read the same book at the same time. For pleasure. I mean, of course, we had our assigned books, but this was one of the books that went around the group, and everybody was so excited to read it. And the film was so good.
And also, it represented, because we had 4 months, and we worked 6 days a week, and on the 7th day, we would organize...
Defrosted?
Yeah. We thought, actually, that's true. A wonderful Frank Marshall had a bar. It was like being in the Army. They set up, because we were in this kind of abandoned ski lodge, he set up a bar for us, and they literally hired in like a DJ and a bartender. We had the same set list, every Sunday. I was very... It was like, 8 o'clock, I'm Too Sexy, 9 o'clock, Nirvana, it was the same songs. And we would have,
Walking in a winter... No cold songs.
No cold songs.
No.
But I was very popular because there was no women in the movie. Right. So I was very popular dance.
Dance card was full.
Yeah. Nice. I got to dance a lot, but Frank Marshall is I shouldn't even say amateur because he was an excellent magician, but he started us doing it also a talent show.
Oh, nice.
So we would make up little songs about each other, little ditties, we made a gag, we made a gag reel.
Nice.
These were just like my fantasies.
Which is weird, having a gag reel on a movie about cannibalism.
Oh, yeah. No, we did every joke, we would shoot a scene like, you guys got, rescued. What are you going to do now? We're going to Disneyland, So we would do jokes like that. We had another, oh my God, we did every gag in the world. Like we were in the plane. He did something with Vinnie Spano carrying a cross across, on his shoulders, like Jesus Christ. We did every joke known to man was in the gag reel, but those were the kind of things. And on Sundays, this is the last thing we can move on. But the last thing that was also amazing was that the closest town, which was about 45 minutes away, was called Invermere, and Frank Marshall personally rented out the theater, bought out the theater so we could watch a film. And we would watch, we watched The Warriors, which was a movie. Sure. He had something to do with it. Yeah, come out and play. So we saw movies like that. The Flight of the Phoenix. We saw Robert Aldrich plane drama. Nice. And we'd hoot and holler at the screen, and it was only us in the movie theater.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was again.
That's a great experience, though.
It was. I mean, and to this day, whenever I see anybody, from the film,
sure.
I mean, we just go right back to that experience and, what we all went through and how much it meant to us.
Did that inform how you run your sets when you're directing?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I was so, my first experiences in film, I worked with Frank Perry, Martin Scorsese.
Some lightweights.
Yeah.
Okay.
Frank Marshall.
Nobody important.
So, and then Gus Van Sant. So it was like boom, 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 and absolutely. Again, these are people, and I've said this again and again, that are leaders, that you want to do everything in your power to help them because you personally respect them and I don't even say love them. I mean, we loved Frank and Kathy, and as I've said,
is that because he would do anything for you guys? What was can you
you just have a sense that from the very beginning, again, he set a tone of, the first thing that happened. I mean, it sounds like a little thing, but we all got parkas with our names on them, and I remember at the cast read through, he just was made us feel, we all got little boots and had our name and parkas, and he was Frank. They were huge producers, and they just made us feel like we were just part of the family, and really inclusive and, never yelled at anyone. I mean, even, if we made like we had in one of the plane crash sequences, we had to be dropped on a hydraulic system like 10 feet in the air. And, it took all day to set up and, it dropped. And instead of being scared, everyone went, whoa, like that, And he kind of came up, and I remember he just smiled on his face. He goes, yeah, guys, don't
do that.
Don't do that again. He goes, okay, let's go.
That reminds me of the time when you messed up that scene.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
With Marty.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't do that again.
There's another. I don't want you to tell it, but I just want to tell people that there is another story in the book that was from Alive that they'll have to read the book to get. So,
also with Frank Marshall,
with the potato.
Oh yes, where I completely lost my mind.
Yes,
because I hadn't eaten for 3 days, and we were filming.
So yeah, there are other good stories in the book. So okay, we can talk about. Do you want to talk about guilty pleasures or sexism?
Ooh.
Well, yeah. How about you? What is it that you don't get a chance to talk about because you're either interviewing somebody and you have to play the host, or something that you never get asked that you would like to talk about?
Oh yeah, that's a good question.
Well, let's see. I'm trying to think. We can talk a little bit about guilty pleasure movies. Movies that. Why aren't people that there's this context of there's this ability to see films, and yet the young people aren't seeing them, I feel, because they don't really have the context for seeing them properly.
Yeah, let me just ask you this question, because
Yes.
speaking to that, why do you think it's important to know the history? Why do you think it's important to curate the films?
I just find you enjoy it more. It's it's as if when you're in a new relationship and a person introduces you to something and you go, oh, I hadn't, have you ever read this book?
Yeah.
No, I never read it, and then you suddenly want to read a book because of the person, or you suddenly appreciate a film maybe more.
Well, we were just talking about it live. I didn't read the book until after I saw the movie.
Oh.
And then I read the book. And
Yes.
then I thoroughly, I think because I actually tend to prefer, if you know a book's going to be made to a movie, I always wait to see the movie first. And then because the book's always so much more
full.
Yeah, it has to be.
It just can be, yeah.
But speaking to what you were just talking about, the
Yes.
fact that one of the first things you ask some of your younger colleagues if
Yes.
they know somebody
Who Spencer Tracy is.
and they don't know.
Nobody knows who Spencer Tracy is.
And I'm just boggled by that, how they don't know that.
That's I always make a joke that people think the first movie was Goodfellas, like the first movie invented.
Yeah.
I think that young people think that early films are boring and stiff, and they're not. For two reasons they're important to see these films is that again. If I talk about, if you like anything I do, you could look at somebody you like Richard Dreyfuss and say, oh, I see some similarities there. And then in talking to Richard Dreyfuss, his favorite actor was Spencer Tracy. Now, in his day, which was the 70s, it was probably universally thought of that Spencer Tracy was probably the greatest Hollywood actor. A lot of people feel that. So just based on that, you should probably take a look at Spencer Tracy.
If you're a student of the craft, you would want to
Exactly.
take a look at that.
Because, because people would always mention him as just the most natural.
Yeah. And don't you think he was the transition? Because I understand the argument is that the older movies they're more presentational. It seems like it's actually
more of
you're
like
watching
a theatrical.
play. Yeah,
Yes.
And he's much more natural in his.
He's much more
approach.
natural. He did not come out of a theater background, whereas some great actors of the time, Jimmy Cagney, was in vaudeville.
Right.
Paul Muni, who people
Even
talk
your
about.
grandfather, he came out of theater.
He came out of
He
theater.
had a much more natural.
He had a lot of naturalism in him, but he also, I think,
he kind of walked the line.
he had the ability to be very, theatrical. He
Right.
had I was noticing even the other night, and I never sang for my father.
Oh, it was on. I was going to watch. I saw The Candidate a couple days ago.
He's such a incredible actor. But he is very well spoken, and again, that was something that was very important to me. He was always on me for my diction. But somebody like Spencer Tracy, again and again and again, people will talk about a film, Captain's Courageous, and Spencer Tracy, which he won an Academy Award for in that film, and which, incidentally, my grandfather's in that film, and Mickey Rooney. And they talk about that, just his great, acting performance and his great sense of naturalism. So, but there are other actors that you could certainly look at, Gary Cooper or Cary Grant, and see, we were talking about...
You are a reflection of Cary Grant. He adopted his whole persona.
Yes.
Right.
That's exactly what you were talking about.
Well, he did. Now, and because before he was working with, Mae West. If you see him in his very early movies, he was discovered by Mae West. The famous story is that he was walking on the Paramount lawn. She happened to see him, and she said, if he can talk, I'll take him. Yeah. She put him in a movie, but he didn't really have his persona. No. He kind of developed in some of his early movies. He developed his Cary Grant persona, which he then stuck with, kind of the rest of his life. And whenever he tried to, the only movie, interesting segue, if you want to watch a movie that he produced, which was called Father Goose. Does anyone remember that? With Leslie Caron.
Is that the one with the kids?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I've seen that.
And he's like a beachcomber. Yeah. And he claims that character is who he is, as much as it can be. And it didn't do well. So probably went back to being his
Just like Paul Newman said, his character in Slapshot is the closest to him.
To him?
Wow.
Really? Really? Yeah, I heard in an interview once.
It's interesting when I don't think I've ever played I never got to play a character that was the closest to me. That's why I loved I love working with Turner Classic Movies, because I actually get to be myself. And even when I've been hired as, which is my
give me an Illeana type.
Yeah, my least favorite thing. Play yourself.
Yeah.
And I have played myself, like most recently I was on the Mark Maron show as Illeana, as his friend Illeana Douglas, and I'm so hip and knowing, and there's a scene I'm like casually taking his vibrators out of the dishwasher, and I'm like talking about his love life, and I was like,
I would never do this.
This scene would not happen in Illeana's life ever. But it's always funny to me. So people think that people think that the character in To Die For is me. That's what people think, and it's not. Like, that character is my grandmother, because she was Italian and tough. She was the one who was very outspoken, and so when called upon, interestingly enough, going back to Richard Dreyfuss, that in the play Uncommon Women and Others, when I couldn't play that, I'm always asked to play the outspoken, tell it like it is. And I'm the one in the bakery. I'm like, maybe someday if I stand quiet, if I'm polite enough, will they pick me? No, I'm in the back, like in real life. In movies, I'm always the extrovert, but I think in
flouncing in.
Flouncing.
She flounces.
Yes.
That could have been my.
I had a friend who was an actress who every night was playing a role that was just raging on stage constantly, like screaming, yelling, beating her husband, just like vicious stage experience. And she said, in my real life, it was the most calm I ever was, because I was getting out my aggression every night on stage, 8 nights a week.
Well, that's an interesting thing, because you see actors, who like Bette Davis in particular, where they essentially become, a caricature of themselves, and you lose sight of, who you are. That's
So how do you do that? How do you shake it off?
Right.
Well, that's, you can develop that kind of split personality, I think, where you really then you take the qualities that people like the most and you start adapting them.
Yeah, because you can fall into them so easily. You can access them easily. But do you have that, do you ever find yourself going, wait, that's really not me?
No, I mean, I cringe slightly at, I know, okay, I know what they want.
Okay.
They want,
So have you ever had any problem shrugging a character off then? Or is it, are you able to just, we're cut, so now, boom, I'm done?
Yeah, pretty much. Plays I find to be more challenging, and we talked
about that with Mary.
Because you have to stay in that.
Yeah. You have to stay in that zone, and you have to keep doing it, and so you can never go too far away. I mean, talking about again mental illness, and I had to play a character that was like having a mental breakdown, and so again, you kind of have to. At 2:00 in the afternoon, you're like, is it bubbling? It's like you got to make sure that it's bubbling, but then put it back down, because you have this.
Let it out too soon.
Yeah, but you have to know
it's there.
What I would do is a speed through of an entire play. To that moment, all the high emotional moments that you would have to do. But when it's over, when the play is over, and especially again, it's like okay, maybe 6 out of 10 went well. Mm-hmm. Some nights, of course, everything goes exactly the way you want it. But that's what I find. It's hard to shrug off either the disappointment that it didn't go quite the way you wanted it to go, or that you are playing a character. I always thought that being in a play, speaking of mental illness, was like your worst punishment of having to play something again and again and again.
Like a definition of hell.
Yeah, that to me would be hell, because I kept thinking, God, if this were like real life and you had to keep playing, because sometimes, I don't know if some people say, I have no regrets. And I'm like, you're full of it. I cut it out. I mean, so I have, say, 5 or 6, huge regrets. Of course, I regret not having sex with Marlon Brando.
We know that.
That's number 1.
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't?
Right.
And so sometimes, I'll think of a regret. And even in telling a story, I'm like, ugh. I have to stop it. I don't even want to tell the story because I don't want to remember I regret that.
Yeah.
But when I would do a play, it always make me think that would be the worst punishment, is if you were forced to do a play in which you had to play your regret.
Wow.
Right?
Yes.
In a play, in front of an audience.
Yes, exactly. In front of an audience and with other people.
Yes.
Good heavens. So I have a Twitter question.
Else? Sure.
That was tweeted to us.
Absolutely.
What are your favorite holiday movies?
Oh.
My favorite holiday movie.
And a holiday is not just Christmas time or the end of the year.
Let's go through some.
Any holiday.
Oh, well, I was going to say, I'm going to go with, of course, the classic It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about It's a Wonderful Life is that the film came out, I think they shot it before the war, and then it was...
Right.
And it ran around the studios for years before it actually got made. It got sent to Capra.
Yes, and then they finally made it, and it did okay. It didn't do great.
Yeah, it wasn't the classic that it is now.
The copyright fell out, and so they started playing it on television.
Any
and
channel or network
guess
play
what?
It for free.
Guess what generation? Our generation discovered it on television, and it was our generation. And this gets back to why are movies so important? It was our generation that discovered it on television, not our parents, that grew up and started to write about it. And I think that for me, any good holiday movie, and I don't know why this is, has kind of a good over evil quality.
Yes.
Right? Scrooge has that.
Yes.
And I'm not sure why that, there is no Santa. There is, like the Grinch that stole Christmas. Yeah. And I'm not sure, that doesn't quite follow with the birth of the baby Jesus in a barn, but I think that we all. There's something. I was going to pose that question to you guys. Why do we feel?
Just in a stretch, overcoming the odds.
But we don't have that at Easter or Thanksgiving.
Well,
there's something about Christmas, and it's about the best and the worst of giving,
Yes.
of charity,
Yes.
of I remember every year my father was because we were hippies. We're not celebrating Christmas this year,
Because we're hippies.
And there would always be like, I'd go out to the backyard and I'd be like, I'd get my little mini tree or, I'd be like, I'm going to celebrate it anyway. And then usually at the 11th hour, my father, because at that point the trees
were all
half price. So he'd say, let's get a tree, and then we'd go get a tree and it'd be Christmas after all, So
it's a Christmas miracle.
Yes. So there is always that sense of Charlie Brown.
So he was a little bit of a Scrooge himself.
Oh, absolutely. But I don't know. And there's some early films, Christmas in Connecticut, The Bishop's Wife.
Yes.
Is the one, of course, what's the one with, I can't think. She's with Natalie Wood and Maureen O'Hara, Edmund Gwynn. My God, the most famous.
Miracle on 34th Street.
Miracle on 34th Street. That's incredible. Big Santa trial and,
Big trial.
So that one's. But lately, some of the Christmas movies have changed.
Yes.
And
I know
now,
where you're going with this.
Yeah, they're going into and these I do not like. The family holiday Christmas movie, I am not a fan of.
Why like what, for example?
I'm going to give you an example of a film recently, which was called The Family Stone, in which Diane Keaton is
Sarah
mother.
Jessica Parker, right?
Yeah,
it's a huge cast.
It's like and Rachel McAdams is in it.
Right.
Wilson's in it.
We sort of know it's like, okay, the daughters are going to come home and they're going to have relationships, and that's almost become its own Christmas sub-genre of they're going to come home.
The dysfunctional family Christmas.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I don't find that one at all appealing. I prefer either the Christmas or the anti-Christmas movie, which would be Bad Santa. I guess would be like a classic Scrooged with Bill Murray. The anti-Christmas. Those are my two. Those are the only ones that should be allowed. Let's strike. And then planes, trains, and automobiles.
Yeah.
I would again.
That's huge for Thanksgiving too.
That sort of is the only.
Because everybody goes.
Travels for Thanksgiving.
And I'd say that's
America.
another movie, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, that has gained traction by being on television.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Because I was when that movie came out, I thought it was, John
Hughes,
Candy, John Hughes, director, Steve Martin. But it's gained even more traction, I think, by being
I think so.
For sure.
on television.
And actually, several people here at AfterBuzz watch it every year.
Yeah.
Like they have
It's
a little
a
mini
go-to thing.
get together.
And that's the one where he held out on the big F-bomb. And it could have been a PG, but he said, nope.
It's gotta be.
It's gotta be in there. So
wow.
I thought he held to his guns on that.
Okay. Christmas Story.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Oh, and of course, how could I forget?
How could you?
That then again, that sort of falls into the the Christmas miracle. The family holiday movie always ends. Well, first of all, who you don't want to. Who do you guys think? I have my own opinion. Who do you not want to be in a family holiday movie?
Who do you not want to be?
The mom. I'm not sure.
No, it's always the dad.
Oh.
The dad has nothing to do.
Oh.
The mom always is. The mom seems to be central in the relationship.
Sure.
Like in the Family Stone, remember
yes.
Diane Keaton, we discover she has cancer. It's
right.
Okay, it's not enough that you gonna ruin the holidays with that.
You gotta have to cancel the movie.
You have to ruin it that way.
No, but so the mother usually, but the father I've noticed usually has like nothing to do. There's another one called Home for the Holidays, which was I think directed by Jodie Foster.
Yeah.
And
I don't
again,
remember that one.
Yeah, that's another one that doesn't. Holly Hunter is
Holly
in
Hunter,
it.
Harvey.
Oh.
What's his name? Danny Aiello, isn't he in that?
No, you're thinking that's the other one. This one is goodness gracious, Robert Downey Jr. and Holly Hunter are in this one, but Holly Hunter is in the Lasse Hallstra movie with Richard Dreyfuss. But I don't know if that's a Christmas movie. I think that's
in
just
the winter. That's what I just remember.
It's just a winter-y movie. But again, they come home, and again around around the table, a lot of eating turkey, and everyone sort of figures out their emotional thing. And by the end of the movie, there's always the same. They always load up the car. I'm like, I can't take it. They're loading up the car. Mom in the forefront. Yeah. Mom gets all the scenes. Dad, usually on the porch. And they always have the Midwestern, but they're almost irreplaceable. That sub-genre. They've rammed that one into the ground,
But it's a common. Everybody can relate to it because everybody does go
has
away
family drama. Everyone has family drama. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, they keep redoing it because there's a new generation of people going, "Where's my Home for the Holidays?"
Sure.
I would kill for that kind of movie. That is not drama. That's like the family drama. I'm sorry, in the Family Stone is not equivalent to. My, family.
You almost died on a mountain, for crying out loud. You want drama?
Yeah, you have different expectations.
I want to put my. I'd like to come home and force my give a script and force my family to be
play,
as nice
play the role.
as.
Yeah, there you go.
Like, could you just act like Craig T. Nelson for once?
Yeah.
For once?
For once.
Mom, could you act like Dan Keaton with your perfect hair and perfect recipes? And, they're always like cooking well. It's like, my experience, like, go home. I'm not celebrating this year. I'm not. You can cook for yourselves. Like, oh, we'd have no movie in my house. Because, be like.
You'd have to bring holidays home with you.
Yeah. Everyone is like, whose wires, what happened to my room? Or, the dryer's broken. I'm sorry. I don't have any money. My mom's still echoing. It's my mom's favorite expression.
I don't have any money.
Merry Christmas, Mom. I don't have any money. It's her favorite,
gosh.
We're poor. Well, we're poor now. That was always, I told growing up, my favorite, my mom's go-to expression,
We're poor.
Well, we're poor now.
I know. We're poor now. We can't afford anything.
Okay. So any other holidays? So actually, I want to just talk
Holiday
quickly
movies?
about. We're gonna talk with one of our guests when she comes on soon, who's a big horror film fan.
Yes.
My older sister, when I was very young, used to make me watch scary movies.
Yeah.
At 11 o'clock at night when I was 6. It scarred me forever.
Why would she do that?
Because she didn't want to watch him alone.
Yeah. So she'd subject poor innocent me. But I loved all these
She loves October.
Sweet Rachel and Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, Sweet Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte.
Yes.
The Trilogy of Terror. Do you remember that one?
Karen Black.
Yeah.
Yes.
Those kind of really cheesy horror films are the ones that I love. Just for October, like you were saying, October, Thanksgiving. I mean, Halloween. Any that you?
Speaking of guilty pleasures, my New Year, I will be spending New Year's Eve and New Year's Day Twilight Zone marathon.
Oh wow, nice.
That is that says Christmas to me.
That says
Okay.
I like the psychological more than the knife wielding.
Yes.
More
than the gore.
Rosemary's Baby is would you call Rosemary's Baby a horror film?
Yes.
Because that
absolutely. It's
and
a
The
thriller.
Shining.
Yes.
The Shining.
Oh my God.
Rosemary's
Just
Baby.
saying those names scare me.
Those are my absolute favorite. I don't the ones that are gory. I can't watch.
Me neither.
I don't want to see because they sort of they stay in my brain and I have nightmares. But
I watch them through my hands.
Rosemary's Baby I like because again there's that element that this could the paranoia that Rosemary has.
Yes.
Of being a mom and
yes.
telling it. I always think that that's women's worst fear is like, oh, the man I married is the devil. It's like, or maybe it's just my own personal experiences. But this is in the horror genre, but I'm going to do a huge shout out. I was going to, when Lorraine Newman comes back, but one of my favorite, and I guess you'd call this a monster movie, I Married a Monster from Outer Space, is a must. That is so much fun. And it's sort of a metaphor for marriage. This woman gets married, and as soon as she gets married, like literally like the next day, he's driving home, his car gets stopped, and he becomes a monster, and then he stops. He can't have sex with her anymore because he's an alien, and he'll impregnate her. So of course she thinks like he doesn't love her anymore. And as I'm watching the movie, I'm like, is this marriage? Like it seems like aside from it being an alien and a monster, she's like.
You wonder what the writer was going through at the time.
Because she keeps trying to get romantic with him. And he's like, got
a headache.
Could you,
not tonight, honey.
And it's because he's an alien, but he can't tell her,
Gosh.
And then he starts hanging out with some other woman alien. And I'm like, what is this movie? But
well, we only have a minute or two left here. So one of the questions I just wanted to ask was, why is Wizard of Oz always shown at Easter? Speaking of holidays, anybody?
Is it?
Yeah, it seems to me.
I think.
Okay, that was a conversation stopper, wasn't it?
No.
I don't know the answer.
I think it could be, just something like a programming. One of the things I learned at TCM is that you license movies and you only have a certain window to show them, and this channel, except for Goodfellas, apparently, because that plays on every channel everywhere in the world. But I think I'm going to take a wild guess. But like we were saying with It's a Wonderful Life, that is an association with Christmas.
For sure.
So I think they're going to try to make it a go-to programming thing. Because Easter is not going well in America.
No.
It's not,
in terms
right?
of programming? TV program?
What is Easter about?
No. Well, yeah, I mean, we're plus we have.
You mean commercially or?
Yeah, it's about candy, apparently,
Candy.
and a bunny. That even the bunny thing has gone away. Now it's just about candy. It has seemingly nothing to do with with
the origin of
the origin
of the holiday.
Yeah, but Christmas is a fun one.
Yeah, it is.
Alrighty,
well, you can buy Illeana's book, I Blame Dennis Hopper, at Amazon. It's out on paperback now. You can also find us on Illeana'sPodcast.com. Take a look at our Facebook page. Follow us on Twitter. Buy the book. There's lots more stuff in there.
More questions.
There is.
Yeah, send us questions if you have. We would love to answer them.
Please send us questions.
Yeah.
I'm just going to end by talking about what I am currently reading.
Great.
If anybody wants to read along with me, I am reading Anne Baxter's biography. I am reading a book about Raoul Walsh, a director. I'm sort of boning up. I'm not I like his movies, but I don't know a lot about him. I'm reading a book about George Stevens, by Marilyn Moss, and I am finishing up my Dick Cavett book, which was his third book, and it has great anecdotes. How about you? What do you
Excellent.
reading
I
these days?
truly am rereading your book again, because the first time I read it, I had to read it really fast.
You're compelled to say
I am.
that.
Well, it's enjoyable. I'm also reading a self-help book called You Are Badass.
Oh, that's good. Well, I love self-help books.
Go. Yeah.
I love self-help books.
Oh, and then there's a book an AfterBuzzer here wrote that I'm taking a look at.
Oh,
yeah.
Some of these days I have to read something other than movie books, but I'm into the movie. They're great stories.
Of course they are.
The
Of
best
course they are.
stories.
Absolutely.
Anyway, well, I hope everyone has a great day out there. And as we always say, life is a movie with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I hope we've enjoyed me talking to me.
All Illeana all the time. We'll
Talking
probably
to
do
you,
another one of
John.
these soon.
Thank you. It's fun to be here.
Yes.
Yes, write in some questions, everyone. Have a great day.
We'll see you
Thank
next time.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Popcorn Talk Network or its owners or principals.